You have the con.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our series of Jane Virtual Lunch and Learns. Today we've got a very exciting subject, and that is control and automation applications using Jane Logic. Again, we find ourselves in this very unique situation, trying to keep business going, trying to keep the food supply going is what we're ultimately trying to do here, and doing a great job of it. So we appreciate everybody taking time to join us and be a part of this virtual learning. We've really had quite a few people attend over the last couple weeks, and the comments we're receiving have been very positive. And so we're going to keep going as long as the comments are positive and we have good audiences. So as I mentioned, we've got control and automation today, which is going to be a real treat for a couple reasons. One, the subject material, but also our presenters today. Our first presenter is going to be David Lindsay. And for those of you who know David or have experience working with David, I would say that if you picked up the dictionary and looked at the word can-do attitude, you're going to find David's picture right next to that. I've seen David work with some of the most complex irrigation challenges that I've ever seen. And this isn't just with regular irrigation, but with the technology that goes along with the irrigation, and his stick-to-itiveness, his sheer will has really helped to solve some very complicated issues. So David's going to be presenting today, and I'm very excited about that because I know all of you will catch his enthusiasm for the subject as well. Our other presenter is one from last week, Jeff Toole, our Vice President of Jane Distribution Holdings. And Jeff, as you know, has been a real pioneer in technology for agriculture and irrigation. Jeff's been a contributor to our blog and has been out talking about technology all across the Central Valley and educating growers on the benefits of technology. So Jeff's going to be presenting as well, and that also is very interesting and a real treat. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Jeff, and we're going to get started. So Jeff, good morning or afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you, Richard. I really want to thank everyone as well today for joining us. And before David gets started, I just wanted to take a minute to wish everyone a happy Easter and to say we really appreciate you taking a little time out of your Good Friday to join our webinar. I hope that everyone is healthy and following the recommended COVID-19 guidelines. I know probably people are tired of hearing that, but I do truly believe it's the only way we're going to minimize the impact of this pandemic. So appreciate everyone contributing in that way. Well, that's enough about the challenges we're all facing. Let's talk about Jane Logic and how it can help with your control and automation needs. Everyone is in for a treat this afternoon because David Lindsay, as Richard mentioned, he's probably the most passionate person that I know when it comes to ag technology and the practical side of how it helps growers save time, money, and produce better crops. Before David gets into the details, I wanted to take just a minute or two to frame what we're doing at Jane through Jane Logic in the area of control and automation. Jane's commitment to ag tech through its development efforts and acquisitions of PureSense and Observant are certainly, they're no secret to the industry. Both of these companies are the best at what they do, but I feel we've been labeled more as a monitoring and software leader than a control and automation leader. It is true that there are thousands of PureSense monitoring sites throughout the US, but it's also true that there are thousands of Observant sites reliably doing control every day around the world. And both of these systems are united today under Jane Logic. And I know we've got some of our users on today and hopefully some others as well. In the webinar today, David will talk exclusively about our C3 field unit. It's a pretty amazing piece of hardware that can act as a simple standalone unit for monitoring and control. It can act as a gateway communicating with many units. And it also can act as a remote radio node communicating back to the gateway. And I don't want to steal, David's thunder, but the C3 is a pretty amazing device in terms of its flexibility and power to do many things in various applications in the field. I'm pretty passionate myself, and I truly believe that control and automation are the future for growers to maximize the benefits of ag technology. I want to be clear, it's not to replace the human element in farming, but really meant to provide a reliable means to allocate or to reallocate really resources to more pressing tasks, and provide it in such a way that it is consistent and repeatable every day without distractions or competing priorities. In its simplest form of pump and valve control, we've had growers that were amazed at how much variability there was in their old way of having the irrigators start and stop pumps and open and close valves manually. I mean, we all do it. We've all seen it. It is the most common way of irrigating today. But the reality is that our workers get pulled off every day due to various issues that come up, or perhaps they just simply get distracted by other priorities. So that the timing of changing irrigation sets then suffers, and inefficiencies are created. And this is just one simple but powerful example of how control and automation can help save money and produce more consistent crops. David's going to talk today more in depth and get into the details about the C3 and how users can really maximize the benefits. And he's going to talk about applications and show some examples, some pretty cool installation pictures, and go through that. So I know I'm cutting into his time. I don't want to go too deep into this, but again, I appreciate everybody being here today, and I think you're in for a real treat with some of the things that David has to share. So, David, with that, I'll let you go through the presentation.
Okay. Hey, thank you both for the kind words. I'm not used to hearing that unless somebody's pinning a medal on my chest, and that's been a while since that's happened. I'd like to share just a quick story about my background, and it'll be quick. I spent a lot of time in the Navy, and my last tour of duty, I had a lot of interaction with growers locally in the Lemoore, Hanford area. And I always heard their stories about Sigma and all this stuff coming up, and what are they to do? And I'm just like, sorry guys, I'm leaving when I retire. And then now here I am providing a solution for them. And I truly believe that this is karma. That's why I'm passionate about it. I'm going to show you some slides. I might go a little quick. I might go a little slower. I'll touch on things. I think we can do some questions and answers at the end. And then more so, anybody on here that has a question, you've got my email address, shoot me an email. I'll find an answer for you. We like to do a lot of, boots on the ground. I got to know what you're looking at. There is no real cookie cutter to this, but like Jeff said, the C3 is a very powerful tool. So I'll go ahead and get started. I hope everybody can see the Jane Monitor Control presentation I have up.
Hey, David, I just want to say everything looks great. You sound great. And for those of you who do have questions, you are muted. So if you will type your questions into the Zoom group chat, I will then moderate those questions to David. So thank you.
Perfect. I need a moderator. Okay. So topics we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss monitoring control system overview, the Jane Logic C3, as Jeff touched on, pump control applications, valve control applications, other common devices, which we see a lot. We've got a lot of stuff out there. Scheduling for automation overview. I'm going to touch briefly on it because it's not so much complex to use, but there's a lot of complexity involved with it. And I'll cover that when we get to those slides as well. And then questions and answers. I don't know what it is about this picture Jeff loves so much, but he likes to put these in there. So we've added this one, but this gives a good representation of of a network, mesh network group for monitoring and control. And you can literally see here that you've got weather stations at the ranch house or at the office. That's where your gateway would be if this was a radio. You've got radio units in the field that are doing valve control, soil moisture monitoring, possibly flow. We're obviously looking at pressures because we want to see application rates, and we have to see pressure on off for that. So that's a great representation. It's a little too cartoonish for me. The other things we're going to talk about, flexibility. The unit can be installed in almost any environment. There's not too many applications we found where we haven't found a solution, either with the C3B housing that it comes with, or as you'll see in some of the photos, some other applications for some NEMA 4 housings that we've used for advanced systems. The built-in communication, both support cellular and 900 megahertz. That comes really in handy when the unit is, let's say, in a radio mesh network group, and the gateway goes down for some reason, the tractor hits it. Well, we can fire up any of the other units within that group and now make it the gateway. And then we also have the issue opposite of that. If there's no cell, we can radio up to places or down into valleys. Power requirements, and these units have a dual lithium-ion battery system in it. We've seen great success with it. Plenty of power. Literally one battery is almost a standby. We use it to boot the system up. And then after that, it's just kind of hanging out there. The solar panels that we provide are very adequate. They're 14-watt panels. But we also have the ability to tie in at the pump stations with 120. That comes in handy as well when you're holding relays and so on and so forth for pump control. Customization. Configure, like I said before, either a gateway or a radio node, or they could be just a standalone cell unit. So there's kind of three applications right there with the radios or the communications within the devices. The robustness of it is one of my favorite things. I've seen these units beat up, hit. I actually had a grower that he said no one was in his field that day, and he's on the approach end of Fresno Air Terminal. I said, well, maybe a plane hit it because it was devastated. But the housing held up and the C3 inside was still chugging along. The only reason we knew it was offline was because solar panel was in the dirt and we saw a decrease in the batteries, because we do monitor the internal workings of the systems for potential faults, because we don't want these things to break or anything to happen within the field. Okay, next slide. All right. Applications, a standalone C3, you could do pump control, 3 pressure transducers, 4 flow meters or pressure switches, and a weather station. So there's just a standard C3 installed. You got a lot of functionality there. When we add the LSR card, it changes a little bit. We got control up to 4 valves, 1 pressure transducer or pump control, flow meters or pressure switches. There's 4 of them there as well, and a weather station again. When we start tying into the Twig and the Atom controller, you'll see a little bit of change in our functionality, but then those systems are designed to take up the slack. So again, you have pump control. You can control up to 30 valves with the Twig system, 4 pressure transducers, 4 flow meters, or pressure switches.
Hey, David.
Yes, sir.
Good question here. I think that's appropriate to answer right now. And the question is, does a C3 require line of sight?
And no, it does not. In radio, yes, we will put the antenna up 30 foot on a tower if we need to get over a building or a small hill. If it's a significant terrain obstruction, then we would just fire up the cell unit and go direct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. With the Atom controller, it's an IP addressable component, and I'll show you a picture of one later. We literally have one deployed in the state of California. There's just not that much need for it. But we do get pump control. We can control up to 8 valves with a single Atom, but the Atoms can be stacked, so we can almost unlimited amount of valves based on the memory of the C3. So I'm not sure what our limit is there, but we'll just say maybe 30. 3 pressure transducers, 4 flow meters, or pressure switches as well with that. So here's some C3 installation examples. On the left-hand side, you see there is this is a pump control. And of course, we've got the ports there to do it, so we're automatically going to tie in with pre and post filter pressure and flow. In the center there, this is a deep well, we're controlling a deep well, 2 boosters, a Twig TD200 controller with 12 valves attached to it, radioed, obviously, a weather station, pre and post filter pressure, 2 flow meters. And all this is actually, these 2 C3s right here in that gray box are actually running 2 10-tank systems. So that's a lot of data coming in, and we're controlling the Twig to tell what the valves are supposed to be doing, plus those weather. This is one of our advanced sites that we just installed at the beginning of this year. This will be the first season. We know it'll be successful. We've run all kinds of tests. We're ready to go. I'm super excited about it. Row crop. On the right is a small filter site. It's probably 20 acres, but we went big because he had the hardware for it. So we're doing pump control, pre and post filter pressure and flow. This guy, he doesn't have to go out there if he doesn't want to. He's literally got a dude that runs down the fields and checks for leaks and calls him, tells him what's up, and he lets his system run. On the left here is another typical installation, pre and post filter pressure, control, and flow. On the right, I don't know why those lines showed up there, but anyway, sorry about that. There is, that's our Atom controller. So again, it's a one-off. It's in a 20 by 20 NEMA 4 housing with a single C3. I built the circuitry. It's controlling 6 valves. There's a weather station, pre and post filter pressure, and we're controlling the pump. The reason we had to go with the Atom controller vice the LRC card was because the LRC card is limited to 4, and she had 6. And literally, we built her filter setup with her valves centrally located so we could do all this from literally one telemetry device. Here's another, this is a pretty advanced site here. It was an NRCS project for control specifically, so they have some specifications. We're controlling a deep well, a booster, a CM16 fertilizer injection pump. We're monitoring pre and post filter pressure flow, and for NRCS, we had to monitor well level sensing. This setup is kind of like the one you saw in the NEMA 4 housing, except for there's 2 C3 housings out there because they had to be remotely located, but they're so close, the external antennas work perfectly, and they're definitely line of sight, in other words. And then he built this cage around it to keep dinosaurs out. Another typical pump control installation. The customer wanted flow. We gave him pre and post as well, saw some efficiency issues, had them repaired, and then found out how well we did control, and now we're controlling it. So you can start real small and you can work your way all the way up. And I'll kind of touch on that in a minute too, of what one of the product lines that we carry that is a good step in the door. For all my engineer buddies out there, here's a schematic. I know Jeff loves this picture too, but it's basically how we do pump control. The wiring diagram doesn't change much when you go into a VFD because the VFDs, I haven't run into one yet that they don't tie in an auto loop already. There's usually a wire that has a loop going between 2 pins, and you just either cut that or you tie into those 2 spots with your relay, and the next thing you know, you're controlling your VFD. That's very popular right now because everybody's putting in VFDs. On the valve control side, the picture in the background is just for looks. That's a control site as well, pump control. We don't have any valves out there yet that we're controlling or in those fields. I just like the picture, it looked good. On the bottom left was a design I did for a Twig system in mind that eventually he'll upgrade to Jane Logic this season. I think he's going to pull the trigger, but he's already got the infrastructure with the Twig system. And this was a replacement. We retrofitted with the Twig because the current wired system he had in place was failing miserably. The runs were too long, wrong size wire gauge, and that's already buried with the main. So we weren't pulling that up. So I convinced him to go radio, and he ran all last season, has no issues whatsoever. And he's already talking to me about this year about going remote, which would be phenomenal. On the right-hand side is literally a Twig. That's a Twig 1E. So it doesn't have an external antenna. They're all internal. The system has a repeater. So, you know, we're having no issues with communication. And all this data comes back to us as well. So we literally can see RSSI from the Twig. So Nelson has partnered with us phenomenally on this. And there's literally nothing that their system is doing that we can't see. And that means we get to document and log it. So it comes in handy. This is our LSR card. So on the bottom left, you see that's the C3B housing with a C3 in it. And then the LSR card just mounts to the door there. That gives us the controllability for the 4 valves. So again, you can even repurpose a unit once it's at a site by just adding this card, or I can. I don't think you're going to do it, but you could.
Hey, David, we had
Yes,
a
sir.
question here that I think is appropriate right now. Can you link it with other controllers besides Twig?
We do have a couple other, we don't advertise. I would have to run that to ground. It's a communication line. It's a language they talk. We're not partnered with anybody else other than the Atoms. I don't even know how that works out. I think that's just a device we control. But I would definitely be interested to know what device they have currently out there, and then we could run that to ground and see if it's something we can talk to. On the VFD side, kind of related to that question, not only controlling it, but we can monitor it on our MuxBucks channel. So we can tie into the PLC on the VFD and literally get all the data that the VFD has. So there's not too much out there we can't talk to because everybody's speaking the same language. And I hope that answers the question without being direct. I'd have to know what it is.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Some other applications that are common, level sensing at reservoirs is big. I see a lot of this down in the Bakersfield area. I was told, and I can't find the documentation anywhere, but Caltrans requires overflow protection so you don't wash out a railroad track or a road. In a lot of cases I have down there, I think we have 5 that we're using an ultrasonic level sensor over the reservoir. In this picture, we're using a pressure transducer, and it gives us more accurate data than the ultrasonic. So we really like installing these, and it's the same device that we install on the wells as well for level sensing in there. The top right is a chemical 33-gallon application where we're monitoring the level while the company's monitoring the level of their chemicals they're injecting into their drip lines for preventative maintenance. These are remote sites. It gives them the ability to get an alert so they know to send a technician out there instead of sending them out every week burning fossil fuels to see if the level has dropped. We also can trend it for them too, which is nice. So if somebody changes the application rate and they weren't supposed to, we can literally find out exactly when it happened and we can alert off that as well. The bottom right is just a sunset in California over a reservoir. Scheduling overview, like I said in the beginning, scheduling, it can be complicated. To do it, it's not. On our end, the setup is probably crazy as far as the programmers, and I'm glad I'm not a programmer. But here you see an example of, this is 12 valves. He's running 2 sets, and he's recycling his valves over a 24-hour period. So 24 hours, 6-hour sets, 12 valves. And he's macroed those so that, valve 1 and 2 will turn on, and 4 and 5, or 4 and 6. And you can literally break it out however you want. This is another example of, this one hasn't run yet. The other one was green because it had already run. That was last year's irrigation schedule I pulled up. This is one that's coming up. This is an example of recycling valves. You can see how they stair step down. So the pump's on the top, runtime set, and then he just pops in his valves and how he wants them to run. So he's going to be cycling through these valves over this entire irrigation set. We're seeing a lot of people want to do pulse irrigation, especially with drip. It works in greenhouses and it works outside as well. Plus, soil types are almost demanding it, especially if you got sandy soils, because you're pushing your stuff past your root zone. And then when we get into soil moisture monitoring, we're telling you when you're pushing it past there. So there's a plug for that. Another example of a recycling of valves, where there would be a dwell in between, so the pump would actually spool down and the valves would come back on. So instead of the building 10 irrigation schedules, he's built one with a dwell in between each. So the pump spools down for 30 minutes, pump spools back up, valves comes open, so on and so forth. And that was it. I hope it was as passionate as everybody was expecting it to be. I think I'm more energetic in person. and Richard and Jeff kind of put me on the spot with that.
Well, Actually, very, very good job, David. Thank you. I enjoyed that very much. We've got some great questions that have come in we've got some time to answer. So thanks for being on time there. You know, I think one thing that we're seeing asked often is this, are these solutions and the three controller options that you were showing earlier, are these hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars? I know it depends on the situation and the setup, but you know, what are some of the kind of big picture, pricing that people can think about?
Great question. And obviously money drives everything. And I get that. I did a design yesterday and I've already quoted it out to one of our dealers. It's 2 valve control systems, pure Jane Logic, no other interfaces in there. And, material alone, it was below 5,000.
Yeah.
For the 2 devices with the LSR cards and everything they'll need. The dealer obviously is going to do the installation. So there's some nuances there when it comes to pricing, but yeah, the material cost of this stuff nowadays is we're comparable to everybody else, and we have a way more powerful unit and the flexibility too. That's the hard part. You don't realize, you're paying the same as somebody else and they're doing specific things. We're doing something and then we can add on to it at the flick of a switch. You've already got the hardware.
Yeah. Well, when I think about it and I look at, say this field behind me in this picture, and I think about the total value of that field, we're not really talking about percentage-wise very high cost at all compared to what I'm trying to grow and the gains I can get in yield and water savings. So I think that helps put it in perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, one case study, we found that within the first season, the return on investment was immediate. And that was just monitoring soil moisture content. A customer had a problem, 100 acres, 4 sets. Since then, though, we've actually shown him data that he needs to go automated because his application of water is way off on those 4 different sets, and he's questioning why. And it really boils down to the guy driving around the field to change the valve set isn't doing it exactly as he's supposed to. And there could be all kinds of circumstances there. He might have got a flat tire, but when you're talking, tens of acre feet difference between 2 fields that are next to each other, and it's all about application.
Yeah. So then the other thing we saw, these schematics, and we heard some real technical terms, right? And I start to worry that maybe I'm going to buy something that I can't actually use. What support, do you offer to these people, or what thoughts do you offer to people that think, well, I'm going to buy something I eventually can't use because it's too technical?
Yeah, another great question. So we look at our dealers as tier levels, and a level 1, tier 1 dealer would be fully qualified, not only on the repair side, but on the training side for the web portal. That's hard to find nowadays. So we partner with our dealers, and I am always available. Our team is always available. I was in the field last week doing repairs, helping out a dealer because they were swamped. Not necessarily doing repairs on our end, but that guy has another job to do as well. And if a customer's down, I'm not going to let his weather station stay down for more than a week before I'm going to jump in my truck and go fix it. Obviously, that's a serious situation, but I look at all these situations as just as important. I don't care if you got 20 acres or 5,000, you're just as important. And I think that carries a lot of weight, and that's why we have good customers.
So I can use either the dealer network. I can come to you direct, Richard Gates in customer service. I mean, there's a lot of options, right?
There are a lot of options. Yes, sir.
That's great. So we've got another chat question that's come up here, and it's asking, can you pulse on loop cycles, for example, greenhouse cooling or frost?
For frost protection or greenhouse irrigation?
Yeah, for cooling
Yes.
in greenhouses, and yeah.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, we on the control side, I tell people this all the time. It might not be in our little drop-down menu, but if I wanted to turn a light on in my backyard, I could do it with a C3. It's just controlling a relay. You see in the schematic here, everything left of where our output is on the 12-volt DC side. Maybe you can see my mouse. Everything outside of this is just a relay. So the electricians come in and do all this work and tie in, and they'll put this relay in, and we're just dropping a low voltage line to our outputs. So the possibilities are really endless. It's on our side, on the website, it might not be displayed as light by your shop, but you can name it anything you want.
Right.
I shouldn't tell people that. But that's, again, it goes back to the flexibility. That's where we can turn. It doesn't matter if it's a VFD, a cold start pump, or a fertilizer injector pump. We can run it.
So David, people have a concern maybe that they're going to spend all their time on their computer and not necessarily in their field. What type of time requirement does this take to manage? How often should I be looking at my dashboard or my reports? What's that typically look like?
That's a great question too. Usually after the first season, the first 3 irrigation events, your most growers are usually comfortable with it, and they recycle their schedules. They'll literally recycle it, and they'll just go in and copy. It has a reuse button. You just reuse it, and then we start setting up alerts for them. What are you interested in? You want to know when your flow turns off. I have customers that are in areas where PG&E, they have brownouts all the time, and the pump turns off. Well, she doesn't want to know if the pump turns off by alerts, but I'm like, well, it's really easy. I can tell it, every time your flow goes below a certain amount, I could have it alert you. We have growers that want to know if their flow goes below. So the alerting function takes away a lot of the requirement of the customer to go in and see what's currently going on. So we set alerts on every sensor you got. You don't really need to log in anymore. One of our products, of the Jane Pulse, it's all this hardware. It's just how the data is given to the customer, and obviously that's an email. Well, those, you get alerts with those as well. So if you wanted to go that direction and not have to log into something, we've got a solution for that as well. Because I do see a lot of growers that are 70 that don't want a smartphone. They don't want to log into a computer, but they know they need this stuff. So I think we've done a very good job at making it easier for those guys as well. And plus our training, I spend hours at night doing Zoom meetings after growers are done eating dinner, and I'm sitting down with the husband and wife, and they're drinking wine, and I'm going over how to operate their system. So I don't know if that helped either.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You were mentioning Pulse. How does that work? I mean, what are the advantages of that, and why should I be using it?
Well, so what we did was we looked at obviously Sigma, and I think we're probably experts on Sigma. We've been kind of looking at it since 2014 when Governor Brown signed it into law. We tried to prepare growers, especially in the Central Valley, for this, and one of the product lines we developed was Jane Pulse, and our dealers are putting it in, our irrigation dealers are putting it in with systems that they're putting in drip tubing and filter systems, usually sand media. And all it is it's literally the C3 in the housing with a pre and post filter pressure, and we're tying into their flow meter. We have 3 kits for various flow meters. We can cover all the spectrum, even if it's a mechanical saddle meter. And that comes in form of email. It's giving them pressures, differential, daily, weekly, and then you also get the report for your flows. With that comes, if the grower contacts me and he wants a high pressure alert or a low flow alert or something in between there, we set that up. So they don't log into anything. They give us as many email addresses as they want, and we send these reports to them. And then the phone numbers they give me for the alerting, I set that up. And then if they get a low flow, they get an alert. We can make the alert say anything you want it to say. So it's a good entry-level step into technology, and everybody's going to need something like this. So there's a huge need for it out there. So we're trying to push it as, again, it goes back to, I feel sometimes I don't work for Jane, and I'm an advocate for the customer, because I'm just trying to find solutions so that these small guys can keep farming as long as they can until their water's gone. Those mainly for the well water, not so much the surface water. But a lot of those guys now are pushing their water through tanks too, and they need to see the efficiency of the filters because they're paying an electric bill to run that. If you're constantly back flushing, you want to know why. Maybe it's not the right filter setup. Maybe your sand media needs to be replaced. And again, we're trying to, figure that all out and give that to them so they can see what changes that they need to make themselves more efficient.
Right. Yeah, and that's a great relief that I don't have to spend time going to fish for this information every day or every week. The fact that it's being pushed to me, I always joke and say I need an app for my apps. So if I'm getting this information in email form and I can quickly and easily review it, I'm a lot better off. So that's a real relief to me.
Yeah, on the Jane Logic side with that too, it's an entry level. So all you have to do is if you want to sign up for Jane Logic and you want real-time everything and you want to grow the system maybe out into the field, it's literally a flick of a switch on our end. There's nothing needs to be done. So it's pretty good. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you, David. Jeff, I'm wondering if you have final thoughts for our viewers this afternoon. Anything that you want to mention or comment on before we finish up here?
No, just really to thank everyone. Thank David. You did a great job. Obviously, everyone can see his passion. One of the things that I wanted to comment on is that systems can be retrofitted. I know there's, just as one example, there's a lot of Nelson valves out there and other type of valving systems. And so if you've got an irrigation system and you're contemplating, what you can do from a monitoring, a control, or is it possible to automate? We have staff like David, Connor Cunningham, others. We work with our dealers very closely that are also very knowledgeable on control and automation. So it could be, as David pointed out, a simple 20-acre system to literally thousands of acres, and we will work hand in hand with the grower to design a system that will meet their needs. And then I think, David, you did a great job talking about alerts. I think it's one of the areas that's a little under, maybe, I don't know if it's underappreciated or underused, but it's something that is pretty critical, I think, especially when growers are worried that they're handing over control of their irrigation and implementing automation, that somehow they're going to be left out of the loop. And so I think setting up the alerts the way that we do and being able to customize those, put it into a text format, could be a phone call, or as simple as an email, so that the grower and the irrigators, the ranch managers, et cetera, are always in the loop. And so I think that's important to call out as well. But really appreciate everybody being here today. We're here to serve you guys. As you guys could see, David is all about finding the solutions, and I think he speaks well for everyone at Jane. In terms of very dedicated to finding solutions for growers.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you, Jeff. And one more thing, Jeff, I think you have a offer for all the people who attended. I think we saw it on the last slide. David moved off of it.
I do. Yeah, we talked about this, and I think it's a unique time. I think it's an opportunity for us to make these kinds of offers. We're super excited about what we can do from a control and automation standpoint. So as a special thank you for everyone that attended today's webinar, we do want to offer a 10% discount on any new control system purchases for the next 30 days. It's just kind of an additional way for us to say thank you.
Gosh, that's great, Jeff. That's a really generous offer. Again, thank you to our speakers, David Lindsay and Jeff Toole today. Thanks for all our participants and the great questions. There might have been a question I didn't get to because of how technical it was, but we will have those answered offline. You'll get an email this afternoon with a link to the video of this session. And we hope everybody has a really great weekend. And as we've said before, we're all in this together, and we'll have additional virtual lunch and learns coming next week and the week after, and we'll get that information out to all of you as to what you can be expecting and sign up for. So again, thanks very much, everybody, and we will talk to you all soon.
Thank you.